COVID was going down, like the height of it, everybody was losing their minds. And we finally, being in a mastermind with him, and, we all kind of asked, and he just acted like it was everyday business to him. And I remembered, saying, you know what, because we finally cornered, he brought it up. He's like, you know what, in good times, I do my best to be useful. In bad times, I really try to be useful.
The Move Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. Get on it. All right, we're back with Moved Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. Today we have a new episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Moved30.com, a transformational program for entrepreneurs. I am excited to have Tony Teegarden. What's up, brother?
What's up? Glad to be here, dude. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to have you on. I'll tell you that when I started kind of looking through your stuff. We'd sent some audio kind of back and forth. I was like, oh man, I don't see much on it. You had a thing where it says, lead with what you believe. And I'm like, all right, how do I set this thing up? And then I found that you had a page and all of the coaching that you've done. And I got to tell you, and one of the things that I talk about, Move, is just consistency. I got to tell you, bro, I don't know if many people get to tell you again, have you, created success, but bro, you are consistent as F.
Thanks,
Looking back, I'm going to tell you, what do you think the day of your first episode of your first podcast was?
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's a great question, because I do not know. It's been a long time. Yeah, good question. I have no idea. I think it was like 2015, 14, maybe. I don't know, 16.
Bro, I got your number, brother. I got your number. It was April 12th of 2013. You did your first podcast.
Wow.
Going through you and seeing this, you're a true coach. I noticed through this entire thing that you've been consistent through that. So what I'm interested in, because you got into coaching, it looks like you did your first podcast 2013. Your page's first was actually 2009. So you've been consistent. So let's just start this thing off.
Yeah, dude.
What got you into coaching, man?
Such a funny story. I don't think I've shared this, so I know you like firsts on your podcast, because I did a little research on you too. So,
game on.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, gosh, this was, I came out of, I sold legal insurance for a decade. So I've been home based doing that for like 10 years, and I come out of that one day. I was making great money and everything, but my sales manager at the time, and he'd asked me to do something. I'm like, dude, I'm too cute for jail. I can't do that. So I ended up quitting the industry.
And do some guys just know that? There's like a saying.
Yeah. But I went into that was from, let me back up. That was the mobile home industry, then going into legal industry, coming out of the legal industry, or the legal insurance industry. I was doing really well. I was working from home, I was having a lot of fun, but then, just something, I'll put it this way, is a good way to frame it. Whenever you have a 9-to-5, I feel like, because I've had one, but like the last one I had when I was like 20, it was like a fishbowl, right? And I like a lot of room. So then, I got into being self-employed, which was then more of like being in a huge fish tank, which was cool. But then because my line of business, they could yank it at any point in time. So it wasn't really mine, right? And so I kind of felt like I was banging up against this, this fish tank. Well, then I realized there's this whole ocean of opportunity called entrepreneurialism, right? And so what happened was a buddy of mine was like, dude, you should start blogging. You're so good at like personal development and writing and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, the hell is blogging? And so that was that was 2006.
I was about to say,
yeah,
I think you and I will go back kind of some of the same times. So it'll be interesting to hear some of these stories. So 06, I mean, that's your blogging. I mean, we're just WordPress and
that was TypePad actually that I hit.
TypePad, yeah, I was gonna say that, yeah.
TypePad and WordPress was just coming out. Yeah,
9 or so, 07, 8, yeah.
Well, Google.
But that was all tied to blogging. There was no such thing as
totally.
Website. Yeah.
So he tells me, he's like, dude, you should start doing this thing, blogging, and so I was like, okay, cool. So I started, and I started on TypePad. And it was so bad. Like my first probably like 3 months, I typed everything bold and italic, everything. Like we know how ridiculous that is. I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
What do you think it was back then? You were like, this is what I think people need to see. Do you think it was that you felt you needed to scream?
Yes. because there was so much of me pent up that I wanted to get out and I didn't realize it. Right.
Crazy.
So, so what happens is I start to learn, and by the way, I'm still doing the legal insurance business on the side, but now I've kind of directed my focus on this because I'm getting renewals coming in and stuff. And so I'm focusing on it. Well, come to find out, I start to learn how to, set up my own site. 2008, TonyTeegarden.com went up. And, I learned how to do all that myself. And so I was going to be a life coach, funny enough. And so being,
was that a term that was being run around in 2008?
Not really, no. But, I mean, there was a small amount of it, but I just knew I wanted to work with people in that capacity. I have a deep propensity to want to work with people, on a very personal level, very That's deep cool. level. And so that's what I was going to do. But then all my life coaching friends were like, oh my God, your site looks so amazing. And and you're so busy and you've always got clients and what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just figuring stuff out. Right. And so I started helping them for free, which I figured out down the road was a pretty bad business model. So I stopped doing that. I started charging it, setting up WordPress sites and stuff. I was like,
you don't pay very much taxes.
No, you don't, but I don't mind that problem. So I ended up setting up the websites and I set up, but the thing was, I was going through a lot of direct response marketing I was learning at the time. And so I started I went from doing setup WordPress sites for free. Yeah. Oh yeah. Evan Pagan, all that, all that stuff. I was deep into.
We just had Jason Moffat on.
Oh, did you really? Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Remember him, of course, with Kern and all those crazy launches. Yeah. Very cool. So yeah, I ended up, literally figuring it all out. And I went from charging zero to pretty short order of time. I was charging $5,000, but I wasn't charging for websites. And that's what everybody thought that they wanted. And so what I told them was I'm going to build you a lead machine. So it's not enough just to have a presence. It's kind of like having a boat in the middle of the water. If it's got no engine or has no sail, it's not going to go anywhere. And they understood that analogy. So I was like, but if we can have, set this in a place where there's wind, set up a turbine on it or whatever, you can get leads to it. And so I was charging $5,000 for WordPress sites back when people were struggling to pay, charge $500 to $1,000. Yeah. But it was because of that. And I also learned a lot about branding and positioning. A lot of my life coaches, I would say, they'd come to me and I'd say, well, the first thing we're going to do is not call you a life coach anymore. Because it was starting to kind of become, known at that time and there was no differentiator. So I would take someone like Bree, a good friend of mine, Bree at the time. She went from being a transformyourlife.tv, that was her website, to the midlife crisis women's coach. And so one of the things I was doing, I was really deep into SEO back then as well, and kind of mixing that into the marketing. So I did some research.
That industry changed a lot, didn't it?
Oh, so bad. Yeah. So bad, but so much, right? It's
we used to do reciprocal linking. You remember all that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh,
you remember, we used to buy links on ESPN.com. It'd be I got to get a college email. Just
yeah.
Remember that? If you had a not an org, if you had a college, that was money. Email, then you had that sending traffic. Yep. Then your ranking would be through the roof.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. We never did any of that funny stuff on our side.
I did. Right. I did for sure.
Yeah. I totally did. Link wheel anybody?
Oh God, did we for sure did. Yeah. For Black sure Hat World, did. Anyways, I just thought you'd kick out of that one.
Go ahead. Yeah. I was not registered on Black Hat World at all. I swear.
I wasn't registered, but I did some shit.
Yeah. So yeah, I just to cut the story short there, I just really learned a lot of going through that process and really getting to the heart of what was effective, for people. And so I remember Bree, I said, hey, listen, transform your life. I'm like, if I cut off your legs, I transform your life. She's like, yeah, Tony, but that's not what I mean. I'm like, no, I know, but it's left up to interpretation. So I ended up going to the Google keyword search tool and started looking and found that midlife crisis women, that term, the exact phrase, was searched 26,000 times a month. It also was obviously a very present pain, that people were trying to figure out and solve, which I was like, okay, bam. So we ended up buying the exact phrase domain, midlifecrisiswomen.org. And I got .com too, but I did .org on purpose. And so just because it seemed like it was much more servant friendly and less, pushy. Yeah. And so, I ended up doing lead magnets and within a short order period of time, man, we had it set up because back then I was into doing applications to phone. And so she was just getting slammed with stuff and it was so on point. We had dudes that would show up to the website and be like, I think this is what my wife is going through. Can you help her? And of course I'd have to teach her to respond back, well, your wife has to want the help.
Let's rephrase this. I see the problem with my wife. Can you fix her?
Yeah,
she doesn't see a problem.
Yeah. That's going to be a tough one to flip around there, brother. So yeah, that was the short story. That's how I started getting into online marketing and just digging in and figuring out my chops along the way.
And through that process, one thing I did notice is as I went back, some of the stuff that, because I try to do a little homework in there, you had some really cool stuff. And I think that some of the things that you brought up, and there was a post actually back in 2015, and he was like, someone's going to disagree with me, but I don't care. Okay. So gorging on data and information doesn't constitute as self-help. It only serves one to be constipated with knowledge and eventually leads to overwhelm and inaction. I'm sure my coaching friends would agree. There's an epidemic in the world where people are gorging themselves the data and information buffet with the intention of getting a desired result. And I look back at some of these things that we talk about because Facebook allows us to kind of go back and think, what is that, even in that phrase that you had talked about back then, how does that apply even today?
Well, it's funny. My philosophy has shifted quite a bit. But I do believe that, listen, Einstein, I was just reading this the other night, like Einstein talking about that imagination is more powerful than knowledge, right? Within context, of course, that there's so much knowledge, there's so much data, but without context, without reason, without purpose, to apply that, like your attention's all over the place. You're like a pancake, right? And so, when looking at how much people think that knowledge and information, of course, I mean, it's taught to us, right? It's impregnated in us as we grow up through, going through college. I never went to college, but going through high school and going through college, like remembering data, remembering this information, that's not real learning. Probably one of my biggest breakthroughs, and especially probably a couple of years before that, even, which led to me writing that. Wyatt Woodsmall, I loved he's one of the foremost behavioral specialists. Eben Pagan was partnered with him quite a bit. And he would say, learning can be gauged by behavior change. If your behavior doesn't change, no learning has really occurred, on the accumulation of knowledge and information. And I always thought that was powerful, because if I look at my life over time, what really leads to joy and fulfillment for me, but it's actually having experience, right? And experience, depending on the lens you want to look at it through, it could suck, or it could be like, attach or assign no meaning to it whatsoever, and so allows me to lean into it. So I think with like, I've gone through a lot of shifts since 2015, especially just in my philosophy and the way that I view myself and the world and how it operates. I just know that so many people are looking for something outside of themselves: data, information, relationships, whatever it is. There's so many people out there looking for something outside of themselves rather than looking for the satisfaction of what comes within, and really deepening that part of ourselves and deepening that journey and deepening that conversation. So
I think that that conversation is super important. And I think that people talk about entrepreneurship is really a journey through yourself. It's like, I have to conquer this to get to the next level. I have to accept this as reality to get to the next level, release my ego, get to the next level. I know. Do you do much traveling?
I did. I haven't since the great C word, but I mean, I've done a little bit. I just got back from South Carolina, but I mean, I like to travel, but I haven't done a whole bunch. I
noticed that you'd done Tulum. What'd you think about that?
That was in 2017. That was my she's like my soul sister, Katerina Satori. Matter of fact, definitely have her on here. She'd be a blast. But yeah, that was a life changer. That was a game changer. So that actually led me to moving to Laguna Beach, California, inevitably. But it was funny. I came out of a relationship in 2016. It was the end of 2016 where I was still kind of had my finger up my butt, trying to figure out who I was, just, kind of reinventing myself after all that ordeal. And I ended up going out to California with the same guy who had got me into the blogging piece of it back in that old day. And he was like, dude, I'm going out to California. I know you've been thinking about moving out there. Once you get out of the house, quit, being a bum, and, come out there and hang out with me. And then I'm going to hang out with a friend of mine, Alex. And, we're just kind of do our thing, but you just chill and do your own stuff. I spent the week there. I ended up doing the very last, like Saturday and Sunday. Our friend Alex had asked me like to come out, and I was like, okay. I didn't want to do any marketing stuff, but they were having an event, so I go. Ended up meeting Katerina Satori. At the time, I was anti pretty girl. I was like, if they were pretty, stay away, right? And she tells me, I remember we were in the cafeteria. She says, Tony, come over here. I'd like to talk to you. Just and I'm like going, oh damn, she wants to talk to me. So anyway, but it was fantastic. We hit it off immediately, and then as soon as I got back to Florida, she reached out to me, said, hey, on my heart, I feel like this is meant for you to attend. Went to Tulum, and it was a game changer. I ended up like 5 days out there. Just beautiful. She ran the retreat fantastic. There was a lot of free time for me to reflect and write, but yet we went and did the Mayan ruins and, a cenote, which, underwater lake and all that.
Yeah.
Just a really great, it was a great experience, again, because this goes back to some of my shifts.
Yeah.
I had so many experiences there and new relationships that I connected with and things that challenged the way that I saw the world. And it wasn't long after that. I think it was just a couple months later. I was like, yeah, I said, I'm moving to California, and I did. So it was a catalyst for me, but I love Tulum.
Yeah. And the reason I kind of brought it up is because like, there's this thing of entrepreneurs in the internet space that there's like this, like, I don't know what it is. It's almost like this fantasy land that people want to go to and they want to experience. I've never been. I've been to some things like that, but I haven't been. So I've always kind of wondered if it was like, worth going, or if it's kind of just hadn't had that experience,
Yeah, especially the resort that we stayed was like big tree houses, but they were obviously really nice, and they were up in the trees, and it was very ethereal and right on the beach. We'd wake up, meditate, and have the sunrise right there. Yeah, those are moments I'll always cherish for sure.
That's cool. And you're a photographer as well.
Yeah, I say I'm a, what do they call it?
You're a golfer as a photographer. You're good,
something like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do a lot of amateur. I call it amateur. I've got a Canon T5i, but I use my iPhone now that I've got the 13 Pro Max. And I got like the terabyte because I do so much video now. So I do reels. And Instagram is where I do all my stuff over there. So Instagram.com/Tony Teegarden. And that's where I do a lot of that stuff. And I love that stuff. I'm an artist, being a musician growing up. And
I was going to ask you, I was like, did that go in? Because it's kind of funny you say that, because I took photography in high school, and then I think I took a college class. I think I did. And then I ended up playing guitar as well. Like, so it was kind of,
like, well, I was originally a classically trained violinist for about 7.5 years as a kid, and then transitioned into guitar, found heavy metal, and just went completely off the rails with all of that. Had a great time, but I was always very expressive, very creative. It wasn't until after I come out of, when I got back off a tour, I was in a death metal band. I toured Europe, had my 21st birthday in Poland, played in front of like 10,000 people. I was the screamer, not the singer.
Actually, I was about to say, I was like, so you're not who you are right now?
No, not at all. Hair super long. Yeah, completely.
Where death metal comes with the whole persona, you know that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I was always very creative, very expressive, and there's that artistic side of me, and so I still love doing that stuff. So definitely, like the amateur stuff, photography, videography, and I think that also started in high school. I took I squeezed 4 years of TV production into 3 years, and so I learned a lot about the rule of thirds and how to shoot video and edit and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really helpful.
One of the things I think that entrepreneurs run into, and business owners and either coaches and experts and things like that, is like when to stop in kind of pursuing something, and kind of taking this as an angle. Maybe you can put it as a different way, but you ended up having to stop the blog, right? You ended up stopping the blog. What was one of the reasons that you stopped that? And maybe what was a transition that you said, okay, I got to make the decision and then stop something? Because I think a lot of people are afraid to stop because they think that they're like on the cusp, and then sometimes they are.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a lot like UFC fighters, like I'm a huge UFC fan. And so it's like, what keeps, what has somebody like a George St. Pierre who went out on the top, who knew when to say stop, and someone like a BJ Penn, who's an absolute legend, who went out and couldn't say when to go out and just kept getting knocked out, or Chuck Liddell, who kept getting knocked out. It's like, fortunately, similarly, if we don't make those decisions for ourselves, they're made for us. And, there's a natural consequence to that, right? If we don't, there's natural consequence to either side. But for me, what happened was growth, I really do believe there's a lot why people do anything is around identity, both identity and reputation. So a lot of times, like I felt there was times I could have stopped the blog sooner, but I felt like my reputation of being seen as doing rather than being, right? So if I'm not doing this, then people are going to, then make a judgment about me, which is now I'm going to affect my identity because I'm not going to feel good about myself.
Wow, that's really important. Yeah. That's good.
So there's identity and reputation. And so my identity was wrapped up into the reputation that I was getting the attention from the blogging. And I was making sales. I actually ended up creating a program called the High Ticket Blogging Formula. And I did really great money with that and had a lot of great clients, people that are still friends from that. But yeah, it eventually became to the point where I started to divorce my identity and my energy and my time that was invested in my results. So the minute I divorced my time from my money and my results, things started to change. I realized I don't have to blog. Like, what was I really after? I wanted to make impact. I really wanted to serve people. I wanted to work with people at a deep level. And so for me, now kind of fast forward to what my main business is, my agency and what I do. It's divorced a lot from my identity. I don't have to use my Tony Teegarden brand so much.
Got it.
From that standpoint. And so the blog kind of like my TonyTeegarden.com, y'all can go there, but I ain't done squat with it since probably 2017. I just kind of like walked away. I'll do some stuff with it. I'll kind of go back when I'm ready. Pardon me. But, right now it's like my income is divorced from my time and my energy for the most part. Right. And so it doesn't require that brand. And I do think, and listen, there's nothing wrong with if somebody wants to brand themselves and be the face of the brand. I think that's amazing. You can do that. But my philosophy, the lens of which I started to look at my own life, I'm 49, I'll be 50 in November. I started to look at like my time, my energy. Am I spending it or am I investing it? And back then I realized I was spending it a lot. I wasn't investing my energy. I had a conversation with some friends and actually a good friend of mine, ex-girlfriend. We were talking the other day and, the one friend was saying, or I was telling him about a good friend of mine's son who's doing like, multiple six figures, but with a sticker business. Like he sells stickers out in Colorado. Oh, wow. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's crazy. Okay. And so I was telling her, how much he made. She's like, well, I mean, you do that. I'm like, yeah, but he has a legit business he can sell. Nobody's going to buy TonyTeegarden.com. Right. So, so I'd have to go through a whole, different shift of identity around what the brand is and all that sort of stuff, if that was my focus. Fortunately, that's not really my focus. I have very different focus. So it's interesting. It's divorcing your identity from what you think you're supposed to do, should do, ought do, or need to do. And that's what I did. I just divorced the two.
You divorced the identity and then tried to build the brand not under your identity.
Yeah. Like I don't identify like my worth, I mean, and when I say worth, I mean my self-worth and my net worth aren't determined on Tony Teegarden, right? I certainly have a reputation online and with my name, and I've been around a little while, but essentially what my goal is now is I want the focus to be on the handful of clients that I work with my Done For You agency. That's where I want them to be the stars. I don't need to be out front anymore. My identity doesn't depend on that. I'm not going to go, oh my God, who am I?
You think that's stages of life?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
I think there's also a conversation here. Yeah. I think there's also a conversation that's here. Is like, there's a point where you want to go be your identity, I think as well. Right. Like, I think that the call isn't, it's just from what I'm getting from you is like, that was the decision you wanted to make. It wasn't so much that, Yeah. I think that you probably remember this pretty well. What was his name? Owner of GoDaddy. Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah. Because
what was his name?
I can't think of it. I know.
So he was one of the first. Oh, gosh, damn it. Anyways, he was one of the first guys that I saw, and a lot of people might not know this, but in the beginning when GoDaddy started, he actually was the persona of the business, and he would write blog posts about his journeys riding motorcycles and going across the country and meeting people. I think he's a military guy. Yeah. But when I'll never forget that story. He divorced himself from GoDaddy as he started to like transition the company back into it. And I thought that was pretty phenomenal because at that point he could actually sell GoDaddy because he wasn't selling himself, but he used himself as the story connected to GoDaddy.
Totally. Yeah, I believe I was talking with someone the other day. He was telling me Telman Knudsen, like that's kind of what he's doing is, helping people with mascots for their businesses, so that, the gecko, like the lizard, like all those sort of, like, if you look at that stuff, like it works. And, and I think it's important, like you said, it's stages of life. It's where you're at. Like, if you look at my history, like from at age 7, I went through a lot of child trauma. And so my core wound was I'm not important.
I'm not important.
I'm not.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that.
Let's just say I can see where that's possible. Let's just say it that way.
That's
because
fair.
Here's what I've realized. Like, I think there's a lot of complexity to human beings, especially entrepreneurs. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is, like, at 7, I went through a lot of childhood trauma of, and abuse. And then I have this identity of I'm not important. Well, hello. All of a sudden now I'm involved in all these things where look how important I am. I'm in violin. I'm important. Look at me on the stage and playing metal. I'm important. Look at me as a sales guy, work in the room. I'm important. Right. And all of a sudden, when you start to realize, like, dude, am I driving this thing or is it driving me? Right. Like, that whole identity was driving me. Right. Rather than me driving my life at that point. That's when it was kind of like a big aha moment for me. It was like, whoa, like I've got all this stuff that's kind of driving my identity and what I think I need to do, should do, ought to do, supposed to do, because look at all these people. They're important. They're getting all of this acknowledgement. They're getting all these comments on the blog. They're getting all of these social media likes, right? Like, all of a sudden you think that's what's important. It goes back to what I was saying earlier of like living an outside in life rather than inside out.
Yeah, I think that, God, it's not an easy one to do, is it?
Depends on our idea of easy, right? Like, I think it can be challenging. I think eventually, like awareness, my good friend Jana says, like awareness is the greatest agent of change. And a lot of times it's like, we look at, I say we as in like I hear as a general populace, we look at what's wrong with our life and I go, well, where's it right? Like if I really wanted to deepen a sense of my stuff, like if I wanted to go all in on photography, I know I could figure out how to monetize it and all that kind of stuff. Right. But would it still hold the same, would it still hold that same level of sacredness to me if I'm sitting there constantly trying to push it? Like, I've not tried to grow that account at all. It's just everything is organic because I just want it to be the place where it's like, look, this is my happy place where I get to do this. I don't need to monetize everything I touch. Right. So, and guess what? It could take on a life of its own at some point down the road, but that's out of my hands right now. My most valuable asset is my attention. So where am I going to invest that? Not spend it, but invest it. And I like to,
you have your core business, but I think that what entrepreneurs is like, they always say, don't split, you can only serve one God or whatever, however you want to call that, of like your business, right? One guy was like, you can only be one gangster that was on the show. It was awesome. And he's, you're not running 2 gangs, So in that, one thing that I've done through my life is I drop pebbles though. Like, so for example, building this business of Moved, I as we started to kind of build, I'm like, if I start the podcast, it's like a pebble that just kind of keeps going and then it's growing. And then eventually that thing, but you put it into focus, you play it out and you just kind of move one needle forward. So it's like, almost like there's other parts of your life that you're kind of like building a castle, but it's just kind of slow. You just chill. And then there comes a time when all of a sudden, let's say you've built whatever that account is for photography or whatever, at least you have a baseline.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point. Yeah. I just decide, if that's something I want to, set my intentions on or focus my energy on, that's fine. But I also, like right now, I have a lot of free time, a lot of energy to do things, what I want, when I want, who I want. And I don't have to answer to anybody. Today was, probably about an hour and a half of work, and then it was pool time and then reading and, showering, getting ready for this. It's like, I'm one of those weirdos that I like pool time. I like the beach. Like, I like doing stuff that's not in front of my computer unless I'm like, I've set the intention of like, okay, there's something I want to do. And usually it's something right now. What has really happened over the past year is just only focusing on what brings me joy. And I learned that from my mentor, Travis Sago, of like, like spend your time focused on what brings you joy. And like you're just saying about the pebble in the pond, that is the pebble in the pond. When you focus on only what gives you joy and then outsource everything else, like Dan Sullivan, his new book that he did, I think it's the Who book, like Get Who'd Up, right?
Yeah.
That all that stuff that completely works, but it's a transition. It's like, I think every new stage of entrepreneurialism, you're learning how to walk again, in that particular arena, in that particular area. And sometimes people want to take on the role of CEO. Some people want to take on the role of coach. Some people want to take on the role of the business owner. And I've been fortunate enough to be inside of a lot of these types of businesses at all different levels. And they're complex. From a standpoint, I say, just because of we're as human beings, we're complex. And so I tend not to throw out too much judgment about what people should do, ought to do. It's like, hey, what do you want? Okay, what's the constraint that you're experiencing? And then in my mind, I'm asking, what's the assumption that they're making about how it needs to be fixed? And most of the time that assumption's wrong. So,
and you use that formula on when you tend to go into any program, or not program, but any problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, like any relationship where, because let's face it, I'm in a business where people have problems, and I want to build a relationship to see if I can actually help them with it. And if I can't, I'm going to back out. And if I can, I will. It's that simple.
What do you think is going to, because we are during this, we're kind of at the cusp of, everybody kind of knows we're going to be going into some tougher times. We can get into why that's happening, but let's just
sure. Yeah, we'll blow over that one.
I mean, I think we're definitely stabbing ourselves in the eye.
Yeah.
Okay, let's fix ourselves.
Right.
But one thing I think that because of experience is a good conversation with you, and because I look back, and one of the things that you brought up a few years back, and you're like, our live webinar's dead. And one of the things that you went through episodes talking about profitability and things like that. But Ann, my question in conversation would be, what are some of the things that you think are going to happen as the wallets maybe tighten up? And I'm not trying to throw that out there that you don't just go get business. Yeah. But there's some things that are going to happen. And I was curious in this conversation with you in your past, do you think we're going to go more towards like smaller, low ticket? Do you think high ticket's going to get affected? Do you think more of the automation is going to get tightened up? People buy automations. What are your kind of feelers on what you're seeing out there?
Well, I wish I could take credit for this nugget of wisdom I'm going to drop here, but my mentor Travis,
I'll give it to you.
Yeah, there you go. Right. My mentor Travis Sago said this back when COVID was going down, like the height of it, everybody was losing their minds. And we finally, being in the mastermind with him, and, we all kind of asked, and he just acted like it was everyday business to him. And I remembered his, saying, you know what, because we finally cornered, he brought it up. He's like, you know what, in good times, I do my best to be useful. In bad times, I really try to be useful. Right. And I was just like, yeah, we've been stressing out for nothing. Right. So do I think there's going to be changes? Do I think things are going to get, they could, and I am no business mathematician, futuristic kind of individual. I can tell you what's going to happen there. But what I do know is people are going to continue to have problems, and they're going to continue to invest in getting those problems solved, as long as we're focused on present problems that bring a present pain that absolutely needs to be solved. And so as long as there's problems, I'm going to be useful, because I'm going to continue to solve those. So I'm not really wrapped up in, although I do sell a lot of high ticket stuff, and all of my done for you clients, I do high ticket stuff that we sell, and we don't use webinars or Facebook ads or sales calls or any of that stuff. We close everything with a Google Doc and chat. That's it. So there's an efficiency that I think is going to happen. And I think as we continue to go through this next year, maybe two, the people that are inefficient are either going to be able to stay afloat or they're not. The people who are focused on really solving present moment pain problems are either going to survive or they won't. Right. I think, I just got through doing 2 clients that had smaller ticket items. We did like $47,000 with one. We did about $60,000 with the other. Low ticket stuff. And all we used was email and a Google Doc. So if I can continue to solve problems in that manner for her or for them, for these 2 ladies that I did it with, and they can continue to be effective and efficient in the way that they're solving problems for their people, then it'll be like, for me, it'll be like 2008 again. I didn't even know there was a problem in 2008. Why? Because I was selling legal insurance. right? And it was something that, and it was a proactive stance, not a reactive stance that I was selling from. It's not like you had to wait till something bad happened. I'm like, why do you think wealthy people use attorneys all the time before they sign anything? It's so they don't make dumb decisions, right?
Yeah.
And so when I found that I'm serving and helping and solving problems for people in a proactive way, I didn't experience any financial issues or setbacks. And I was a homeowner then and all that such, but I didn't experience any of it because I just didn't pay attention to that. My focus was on solving problems for people in the most effective and efficient way possible, using my natural given talents. As long as I kept that the focus, I think, and just like the 2000 after the pandemic, like right during the pandemic, I was making some of the biggest money ever because that was my focus. How can I be effective? How can I be helpful in the most efficient manner possible? So,
it's interesting. Elon Musk actually brought that up on something, and he just said, what is the best thing you could do? And he says, be useful.
Yes. Yeah.
He trips me. I mean, obviously his top subject, Elon Musk is being talked about, but he's such a crazy guy. Like what did he say? He said something like, the problem was that we got a bunch of engineers that think that they're right. I was like, isn't that what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, but he's questioning everything.
Everything.
The dude has a lay of the battlefield that none of us have had. Like, you think about, like, why is a general so effective? It's because they already know what the lay of the battlefield is. They've been through multiple battles. They know these things. And it goes back to this thing where we opened up the conversation about Einstein saying imagination is more important than knowledge. Right? Like, think about Elon, like his imagination, like in such, like, we're going to Mars. Like, that took a little bit of imagination because we certainly didn't have any data that we could get it done. Right. So that dude is an anomaly, and go Elon. That's all I can say.
I got it. It's kind of frustrating, even as an entrepreneur, to see, like, how did he? I mean, I got 2 arms, I got 2 legs, I got a head. I'm kind of thing. I'm just like, man, how are you pulling it? I mean, he's the chief engineer of the rocket.
Yeah.
He walked in and he said, "There's no one in here good enough. I'll do it myself."
Yeah. I mean, the dude's a monster. I mean, and I think too, it's interesting. A lot of I use in my marketing is busting the assumptions that people make. And I notice, like, in a lot of my friends, so my friends call me like the king of clarity, and I hate the title, but it's just because, like, I'm, whenever I'm having conversations, and I'm not their life coach, but I know how to listen and be effective. And, most of the time people are making assumptions about what they can do, what they can't do, what's possible, what's not possible, how it needs to be done, how it can't be done. And I think that's the other big thing too. And I noticed with Elon, like, he just busts I don't know if we can swear, but he busts the crap out of. Okay, good. Yeah. He just busts the shit out of assumptions everywhere. The assumptions, like, you got to have all these guys that can do it that are smarter than you. No, I don't. I can hear him saying it now, and I think the same thing is true for us in our businesses. It's like, what assumptions are we making that, it's kind of like me. Like, imagine if I'd have said, well, I have to be putting out content every month in order for me to make, 50 to 100 grand a month. It's not true. Right. But I had to bust that assumption. I had to investigate that, to ask myself, is that really true?
Oh, there's a good line. I think that what you just tapped on is really important. You have to go down the line. And I think that, like, even if we're talking about Elon Musk, he's like, he literally said, I think he said, like, I had a 10% chance of not going bankrupt was his thought.
Yeah. Right.
And then he basically goes, let's just go for it. And then he said, there's that acceptance of risk. And he's like, we're going to blow rockets up.
Yeah.
And I think that you probably can tie into some of this as well. But a lot of us entrepreneurs, we want to assume that you're not going to blow up any rockets.
Yes.
So a lot of people will get into business and they're like, okay, I see somebody that's doing this and they're going here and they're going there. And I think that one thing that people, you really have to forge some of it yourself. You have to feel it, so you have people buy all these courses, but you got to dig in and you got to feel it. If you don't feel it, you have no instinct. Yeah.
You have no instinct and you have no experience. That's the big piece too. Right. So I think you just nailed it. It's a great point. Again, it goes back to identity. People don't want to make mistakes because of number one, how they might think of themselves. Number two, more importantly, how other people will see them, or how they think other people will see them. And so, if you think, again, we've been programmed coming up through school, like you can't get it wrong, you can't cheat on tests. It's like, once you get into the real world, in the entrepreneurial world, like you and I, for example, like we're back and forth here on a call, but we might just as well have a call where we're like sharing insider secrets and things working for you, and it's like we're meant to collaborate. And the challenge is we are programmed just as human beings, at least here in the Western culture, that failure is not acceptable. And so if you mess, and people have mistaken what failure is, like you have to fail. I love how Elon Musk blew up some rockets. He knew he would, because he's already had the experience. Like, you know what, you got to screw stuff up, but you just, the whole thing is not to assign it a whole lot of meaning. And I think that's the big challenge. And that's what's changed for me over the last couple of years, is I stopped assigning meaning.
That's really good. Yeah.
So it's like,
because your identity does not attach to the project that you're on.
And if you can do that, then you can blow shit up. You can have rockets, right? Like, right. And like literally and figuratively, like that's what Elon is. He is not attached. He's a bit of a savant in a lot of ways, but but his identity is not attached. He doesn't assign any meaning to things that go wrong, quote unquote. It's just like there's no such thing as good or bad. It's either useful or it's unuseful, right? It's like,
and you got to be really good at that. I mean, you think at the level, and if you were to like use that conversation, you're like, okay, let's look at like a barometer of how much you have to do that compared to he has to do that. He's literally saying, I'm going to build a car company, and you have to accept that people are going to die building cars.
Yeah.
And he has to disattach himself from thinking, for us to evolve as a society or whatever, people are going to have to die. And it's like, that level of bringing it down to an entrepreneur, that's probably not going to happen in your business.
Well, you have to allow some of your identity to die, for sure. And that's probably more scary and painful than even the thought of someone else dying, as a result. And that's where, someone like an Elon, I can only imagine, I can't, I can only guess that, that dude is detached. Again, I look at him as a bit of a savant. There's a lot of like emotional stuff that ain't going on in the right direction there with him. There's a natural consequence for his genius, right? And it's not that it's good or bad. It's is it useful or is it unuseful, right? If you look at his personal relationships, intimate relationships, it doesn't seem to be terribly useful.
No.
But again, I'm not here to judge that, only in the sense that, like, I would value myself having, family and quality time. So my intentions, my focus are just different. Doesn't make me any, quote unquote, doesn't make me good, doesn't make me bad. I just don't compare myself, much less assign it a whole lot of meaning anymore.
So what's one exercise? Like, I'm always into like, what's one way of like, okay, because, it's so easy for us to get into like philosophical things. Like some people like get into like, I've talked to people about copy and I'm like, if you do copy, if you go over here, do that. Okay, well, what's some examples? Don't just talk about it.
Right.
And in that, it would be interesting to hear like, what would be something that would in your brain that you can maybe use to detach yourself from that?
So, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff. I mean, I've done everything from shadow work to breath work. I've done ayahuasca, mushrooms, like all of these different things over the years to try to get to the seed of. And what I realized is the minute that I'm okay with not being okay all the time, I'll be okay. That's the practice. And I know it sounds woo woo. It sounds this, that, and the other. And yes, I still have Tony here that, will be like, you're an idiot, and then I'll have this idiot, this Tony over here going,
left side, the right side. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Devil and angel.
Right. The angel and the devil, but the Tony that wants to tell me I'm not important, he's definitely always there. One really cool exercise I did years ago when my life was an absolute shit show. And this was after I went through divorce in 2005. And I remember writing down like on one side of the paper, because our brains are hardwired to see all the shit that's wrong. It's easy to do, right? So I wrote down all the things about my life that like 10 things that I absolutely hated. And I don't use that word often, but at the time I hated about my life. And I was able to go into excruciating detail on what those things were, what that was, what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it felt like, what it tasted like, what it smelled like. And then all I did was just reverse engineer those, because I went into so much detail. It was easy to reverse engineer it to, okay, well, what would be the opposite of this? And is this in alignment with something I can see myself doing or being, right? More importantly. And within less than a year, I had flipped around 9 out of those 10 things, like day and night. Right. And I had done things like hired coaching and invested in people and stuff, to help me get through all of that. But that was one really, really helpful piece of it for me. But here's the key though. You just got to live into it.
Live into it. You
have to live into it. I learned, again, a lot of my philosophy, is I'm not going to get it right out the gate. It's like, oh, Tony, that sounds good. Yeah. Okay. Don't assign it meaning. Dude, you're going to have to assign it some meaning and then deal with the natural consequences of it and the chaos that you might feel inside or the pain that you might feel inside. And again, practicing your awareness. And so I'm a big fan of journaling every day. So I journal every day. Sometimes it's nonsense. Sometimes it's like really profound shit that I wish, would get out into the world. And sometimes it's like just acknowledging, hey, it's okay to not be okay today.
Yeah.
Right. And so taking that very simple, like the more simple I keep it and the more I live into it, the more experience I gain, the more wisdom I'm able to have, and the more altitude. This is another big key. It's like kind of like in relationships. If two people are at the same altitude, going in the same direction at the same speed, you're going to have a pretty cool opportunity to create something good, whether it's just a guy friendship, it's an intimate relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
But think about, like, I've got to gain altitude, because if I'm at a real low altitude with my perspective, my lens of life, if the world is happening to me and not for me, and I do believe stuff is happening for me, not to me, right? Even when the shit hits the fan. And if I'm not looking through that lens, I'm not going to have very high altitude. And chances are my partner's probably not going to have much higher of an altitude. Or if they do, they're going to be like, yeah, this doesn't vibe for me. We're not going in this, we're not same altitude. We're not going in the same direction. We damn sure ain't going at the same speed. So, for me, it's like practicing that stuff, like living into it and getting shit wrong and being okay with not being okay about it.
Dude, this has been an awesome episode, man.
Cool.
You crushed it, man. This is awesome. I think this episode, we're going to break it up a few different ways. You brought a lot of value here, man. I appreciate you. This has been an awesome episode. Dude, how do they find you? Tony Teegarden, the man.
So you can go to TonyTeegarden.com. The email list does work. I do send out emails on that list as well. I like to figure out how I can help and serve. So go to TonyTeegarden.com for that. You can also go on Facebook. I use my personal Facebook, Tony Teegarden, on there. If you find me, I use that quite a bit as well. And then if you want to see any of the photography stuff and silliness, you can go to Instagram.com/Tony Teegarden as well. And that's just my chill, like, little creative place that you can hang out with me there. So that's pretty much it.
Tony, you've been awesome. I appreciate you being a guest on the Moved Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. Thanks a lot. And for everybody else here as well, go back and look at other episodes. We brought up Jason Moffat today. There's other awesome episodes on the Moved Entrepreneur Evolved podcast. Thanks a lot, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, brother.
If you like this episode, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just like Nike is to athletes, Moved is to entrepreneurs.